The Chinese Navy is quietly extending its reach across the globe. A well-coordinated double act is being staged at opposite ends of the globe. On July 20th, a Type 052D destroyer ventured deep into the Baltic Sea, and 5 days later, on July 25th, an 815A reconnaissance ship boldly infiltrated the rim of the Pacific exercise. These actions clearly show that the Chinese military is actively gathering intelligence globally with unprecedented boldness. On the surface, it looks like the Type 052D destroyer is headed to the Baltic Sea to participate in Russia's Navy Day on July 28th. In reality, its goal was to gather military intelligence right at NATO's doorstep. The Baltic Sea, considered an inland lake by NATO, is patrolled daily by NATO reconnaissance aircraft, emitting electromagnetic waves that are prime targets for Chinese military reconnaissance. At the same time, the Russian warship sent to meet the Type 052D turned off its transponder, likely to attempt covert actions. However, under NATO's strict surveillance, this attempt was destined to fail. From the moment the Type 052D destroyer entered the Baltic Sea on July 20th, a silent escort operation began. That morning, Danish patrol boats guided the Chinese fleet across the Great Belt Bridge. Swedish, German, and forces closely monitored this unexpected visitor within their respective 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zones until it entered Russian territorial waters with the Russian warship. The Type 052D destroyer, the Jiaozuo, is the main ship of China's 46th escort fleet in the Gulf of Aden. On July 14th, it completed a 5-day visit to Casablanca, Morocco. While its mission should be patrolling and escorting the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, it appeared in far-off North Africa and the Baltic Sea unexpectedly. Clearly, the Chinese Navy is no longer content with showing off its power in the narrow waters of the Gulf of Aden and has decided to extend its reach across the African continent. From May 16th to 19th, the Xuchang, a Type 056A frigate from the same escort fleet, made a technical stop in Cape Town, South Africa, to replenish supplies and allow the crew to rest. The Chinese embassy personnel also boarded the ship under the guise of consoling the officers and soldiers, likely delivering special materials for intelligence gathering and future operations in Africa. One should not underestimate the threat posed by these Chinese destroyers and frigates. According to reliable sources, at least 2 052D destroyers from the Chinese Navy are specifically tasked with global intelligence gathering. The Nanning is active in the Pacific, while the Yinchuan operates in the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. These 2 destroyers even skipped returning home for the Chinese New Year, making their purpose clear. They aim to thoroughly survey strategic data on the world's major waterways, collect hydrographic and geographic information from various locations, and prepare for future military operations. Since Chinese satellites lack the precision needed for groundwater detection and data from civilian ships is too chaotic, they have no choice but to send warships to conduct on-site surveys. Ports marked on civilian nautical charts may seem easy to navigate, but in reality they are often filled with coral reefs and hidden rocks underwater. For example, the of Nuku'alofa in Tonga has several kilometers of winding waterways with nearly invisible navigation lights at turns, making it easy to run aground. In the port of Cairns in northeastern Australia, the Great Barrier Reef stretches for thousands of kilometers underwater, which poses a constant threat to Chinese warships. The Chinese Navy must repeatedly survey these dangerous waters to record the coordinates of every reef and the course of the waterways. Which ports can be accessed and how? Can a Type 054A frigate enter? How about a Type 052D destroyer? If the Type 052D can enter, what about the Type 055, the Type 075, the Liaoning and Fujian carriers? These questions can only be answered through exploration by the Chinese warships themselves. Without enough information about the major oceans, future military operations could easily end in failure. Such information is crucial for the Chinese Navy's future offshore operations and power projection. Currently, the Chinese military is mapping the seas and rigorously collecting hydrographic data from around the world. The sooner they can complete the map, the earlier they can initiate wars against the US and NATO. The Military Commission, General Staff, Navy, and War Zones are all fully committed to this effort. The Type 052D fleet navigates, explores, surveys, and takes risks around the clock, meticulously recording every key data point down to meters, seconds, and tenths of a degree. It can be said to be an obsessive endeavor. Even so, their victory is not guaranteed. Consequently, the Chinese Navy remains persistent, stopping at nothing until their objectives are achieved. On July 25th, alongside the fleet of the 2024 U.S. Rim of the Pacific exercise, the presence of China's electronic reconnaissance ship was observed. The images show that the ship was very close to the 2024 Rim of the Pacific exercise fleet. Typically, only friendly nations participate in the exercise, raising questions about China's involvement. Despite this, they continue their intelligence-gathering activities. In fact, the primary task of the 815A electric reconnaissance ship is to monitor and gather intelligence from the opponent's RF signal sources. Measurement and signature intelligence involves distinguishing the types and characteristics of the opponent's electromagnetic RF, and proximity enhances the effectiveness of the surveillance. It is evident that the Chinese Navy's intelligence-gathering efforts have become increasingly aggressive and extensive. Their clear objective is to meticulously seek military advantage in preparation for future confrontations with the U.S. and its allies. On July 24, 2023, British Army Chief of Staff Sir Roland Walker issued a warning in a public speech. The British military must be prepared within the next 3 years to engage in combat with an axis of evil comprising Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. This statement was based on a comprehensive analysis of diplomatic, military, and intelligence information and coincided with the recent change of Prime Minister in the UK. This clearly indicates that, as a core member of NATO and the Five Eyes alliance, the UK's resolve to confront China and Russia has not only remained firm, but has also accelerated military preparations. A disquieting message is conveyed. A military conflict between the West and the China-Russia alliance seems inevitable, with the possibility of war breaking out within the next 3 years. On July 24th, a joint formation of strategic bombers and fighter jets from China and Russia entered the U.S.-Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone for the first time. Russia dispatched 2 Tu-95 strategic bombers, while China sent 2 H-6K strategic bombers, accompanied by 2 Su-30 fighters. Russia and China were not merely testing the waters, they likely intended to test for vulnerabilities in the U.S. air defense system, ready to launch missiles if any were found. In response, the U.S. and Canada immediately deployed F-16, F-35, and F-18 fighter jets to intercept them. The airspace near Alaska is vast, and given the similar appearance of China's H-6K and Russia's Tu-95 bombers, it is difficult to determine whose aircraft are flying at high altitudes. The U.S. was able to confirm the involvement of Chinese bombers, likely because they had conclusive evidence. This could be through visual identification by U.S. fighter jets at close range, or other irrefutable intelligence, such as intercepted signals or human intelligence from Russian airfields. Russian bombers operating around the air and sea spaces near Alaska have long been routine, given their proximity to Russian territory. In October 2022, Russian Tu-95 bombers entered the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. Last February, Russian military aircraft again entered this area. What truly shocked the U.S. this time was the participation of Chinese aircraft. It is an open secret among industry insiders that the maximum range of China's H-6K bombers is 6,000 kilometers, and to reach Alaska, they must take off from Russian airfields. The Americans were also well prepared. On March 14th, the U.S. Air Defense Command warned that Chinese military aircraft, ships, and submarines could appear in U.S. waters and airspace as early as this year. They stated that China's ability to operate far from its homeland, near the U.S., hinges on military cooperation with Russia. This indicates that U.S. intelligence and military had already acquired relevant information. If the U.S. had not disclosed it, the public would be unaware of the situation. This suggests that Chinese and Russian bombers have likely been conducting secret drills in the area for some time. Chinese media and some commentators have heavily promoted recent events to stir up nationalist sentiments and boost domestic morale. To be frank, American and Canadian pilots approach their missions to monitor Chinese and Russian planes as if they were visiting a bomber museum. They have never seen China's H-6K bomber. Only retired pilots have encountered it. This muscle flexing has also made the US realize that the alliance between Russia and China against the US is stronger than expected. The fact that China's nuclear-capable strategic bombers can take off and land at Russian bases shows that their cooperation in nuclear military matters has reached a remarkable level. If they can collaborate on nuclear weapons, what other fields can't they share? This deeply intertwined military alliance is unlikely to be broken by economic and technical sanctions. Therefore, the idea of aligning with Russia to counter China is largely unrealistic. If the US shifted to align with Russia to counter China, it would weaken allies' trust in its leadership. Taiwan and the Philippines might fear that if the US can abandon its allies for some so-called strategic interest, it might one day abandon them too. In that case, they might as well surrender. This would undermine any strategy to counter China. Thus, aligning with Russia to counter China is merely a veiled form of isolationism for some politicians. Why is Chinese leader Xi Jinping strengthening ties with Russia now? Some analysts think he may be trying to cover for previous missteps, like the high-pressure domestic policies and pandemic cover-ups. If these were ever held to account, he would need strong support, hence the closer ties with Putin to confront the US. China and Russia are frequently conducting provocative military exercises worldwide. For example, in mid-July, China and Belarus held exercises on the Polish border, openly challenging NATO. Meanwhile, China and Russia sent warships through the Osumi Strait into the Pacific, concluding on July 17th. This shows that the China-Russia military cooperation is escalating beyond current media reports. Their goal is not just Taiwan or the South China Sea, but to challenge the US globally for world leadership. However, the US and NATO are not idle. As soon as the China-Russia exercises ended, dozens of fighter jets from Germany, France, and Spain flew to Japan for joint exercises with the Japan Self-Defense Forces in Hokkaido. Deploying these expensive European fighters, missiles, and maintenance crews signals serious preparation for potential conflict in the Western Pacific. Simultaneously, the US led 29 countries in a second-phase Pacific exercise, with Italy's aircraft carrier arriving with F-35B stealth fighters. The message is clear: the Western Pacific is a NATO concern, not just a US issue. Japan's open airspace for European forces is based on mutual military access agreements. These significant actions, with high costs and risks, shows the West's readiness to respond to moves from Russia and China. Moreover, the US is accelerating its strategic deployments worldwide, extending its reach to China and Russia's doorstep. From July 21st to 23rd, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Mongolia, effectively scouting right next to China and Russia. The message is clear: U.S. presence is everywhere. While China and Russia are frequently active, they still lag behind in terms of weaponry and equipment. Reports suggest that U.S. stealth drones and anti-ship missiles are highly advanced, making the equipment seem outdated in comparison. Recently, U.S. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall hinted at a new intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance platform. This likely refers to the rumored RQ-180 stealth unmanned reconnaissance aircraft. Though not officially unveiled, it is probably already in service. This drone's radar cross-section is smaller than those of the F-117, making it stealthy across multiple radar bands. Its 20,000-meter flight altitude is beyond the reach of most current fighter jets. Only laser-guided weapons might encounter it, but detecting it first is a challenge. During the recent Rim of the Pacific exercise, the stealth bomber showcased a quick sink bomb specifically designed for maritime targets, comparable to heavy torpedoes. This bomb, modified from the 2,000-pound GUB-31 satellite-guided bomb, is cost-effective yet highly lethal. Combined with the B-2's exceptional stealth, it poses a real threat to the PLA's large warships. Additionally, Lockheed Martin recently announced that its Mako hypersonic missile is ready for production. Using a rocket engine and modular and 3D printing technologies, it has a production speed 10 times that of traditional methods and at only 1/10 of the cost. This missile can be equipped on various tactical aircraft, including the F-35 and F-22, and potentially on Allied aircraft. On July 27th, a Russian Tu-22M3 long-range strategic bomber was destroyed by a Ukrainian strike drone at Olenogorsk Airport, 1,800 kilometers from Ukraine, near the Finnish border. The Tu-22 is a key strategic bomber for Russia, used for long-range ground and anti-ship attacks. After the Soviet Union's collapse, Russia upgraded the Tu-22, enhancing its combat capabilities. Now, even Ukraine can accurately strike strategic bombers, a capability that, if applied to Taiwan, could reach Beijing. Russia has no air defense for its nuclear strategic bombers, so what targets are beyond the reach of the US and the West? Is the Kremlin's air defense stronger than that of strategic bombers? Is Beijing's defense stronger? Strategic bombers are top defense units, yet Ukrainian drones penetrated effortlessly, showing that Russia's so-called advanced radar systems are unreliable. What about the Chinese People's Liberation Army air defense weapons? Are they superior to Russia's? This is doubtful, so by testing Russia, China's true capabilities are also tested. Even if Putin ordered a nuclear strike in a fit of madness, his subordinates might not comply and could be stopped by their comrades. Moreover, China and Russia's nuclear weapons are not particularly advanced. Overall, the West still holds an advantage. They have set a 3-year deadline to either contain Russia and China or force them to act first. In such a standoff, the weaker side usually loses composure first. If China and Russia feel they must take risks to avoid complete defeat, they might act recklessly. Thus, the current situation is indeed on the brink of eruption.